The last video that we were programming with the pseudocode, I left you at this position where we've got our main program that we worked through by setting the target string to empty, then having a loop, and inside the loop getting a random number, and then finding the letter in the string and appending it to our target string, and then removing that character from the source or the original string. We kept doing that until the end of the loop, and when we got to the end of the loop there was only one character left in the source string, and we just appended that to the target string and then emptied the source string at the end. So going through it again, just to remind you what we were doing. But the important part was that we had this sort of function. I made this up. This is in my head. There's no function in Python to do this. That's the whole thing about programming, is you make things up in your head and write them down. It's what you want to do. So I know I wanted to remove the character from the source string at the index position. So I created a function, and above I have the function. Now, to be honest, this function is so small that I really didn't need it. But if we're going to do any sort of testing or validation on things, then this function may well grow. And also it's nicer having this separate to the main program, because we can quickly identify all the bits of our code and where they go. So this function, remove character, how's it going to work? Well, we took a look when we were playing around, and I'll go through that again in a minute. You can see it on this slide down here with the fiver, is that we had a left part of the string and we had a right part of the string. So I'm going to create a couple of functions, one called left part, one called right part, and they're going to take the parameters, the source string and index. It needs to know what the string is to find out what it's got to give back, what it's got to return, and it needs to know where it's positioned. So I need to give it the string and the position in the string where I want to sort of cut my string in two, have a left part and a right part. So that's really what I'm focusing on in this lesson, is taking a look at these two functions, left part and right part. Now, before I go much further or take a look at the code, this is essential for the exam. So the understanding of a left and a right part of a string is essential for you to answer questions in the exam. However, not this particular method. This method is unique to this program, so it's going to be a little bit different. But I shall later on come back to left part and right part. And in fact, up here I've got Visual Basic and string functions. And as you can see, and I said before, there's quite a lot of functions to do with a string when we're doing manipulation. And one of them we've kind of used. We've used a len. We're okay with the length, so it returns the number of characters in a string. But what I'm going to be looking at is left, okay, which returns specified number of characters from the left side of the string. I'm going to be looking at right, returns a specified number of characters from the right side of the string. And I'm also going to be taking a look at this one. Mid returns number of characters from a string. Now, these three things, left, mid, right, are just a little bit different to what we're going to be programming in Python. As I said, what we're doing is specific to our program, but I shall look at it in a separate video after this as a revision for your exam, so that you understand what left, right and mid, or for middle, is. Anyway, I don't want you to get confused. That's the whole point. I don't want you to think, oh, but you taught us the left part and now you're teaching us left and it's different. I'm telling you now they are different. So we will look at the exam version later. So let's go back to what we were doing. We were looking at this word fiver, and we had a random number 2, which gave us the V as the indexed value, and what we wanted to do was separate it into a left part and a right part. The left part just contained the two characters F and I, and the right part also contained two characters, in this case just the E and the R. So we've got to write a piece of code to do that. Now, understanding the left and the right is fine. You'll pick it up from this video. Coding it is going to be something different. If you are level 1 to 3, just understand that there's a left part of a string and a right part of a string. That is sufficient. 4 to 6, you might want to have a look at the code and particularly the function, see how it fits in, but not necessarily understand how the code is written. For level 7 to 9, we are going to be doing something called slicing in Python, which there is no such thing in any other language. It's Python specific only. So the code that I show you really isn't going to work in any other programming language whatsoever, which is why I'm going to show you the left and the right a little bit later on. So if you are thinking of doing computer science after this, then pay particular attention to what's happening. It is quite difficult to get your head around, but I'll give it my best shot on showing you what it is. So this is what we're going to be doing, is working out the left part and the right part of a particular string. And I'm going to start off looking at the left part because we need different methods to do left and right. So let's take a look at the left part. I'm going to have, or I've got at the moment, my function remove character. It takes the source string and it takes an index. Now what are those two values? Well, the source is fiver, the whole word, and below in black I've given the arguments as the string and a number rather than just variable, so you can see it working. So the source is fiver and the index is 2. And when I did my new string is the left part source index joined to the right part source index, that is going to work out to be this. So my new string is going to be the left part of fiver at index 2 and the right part is going to be fiver at index 2. But at the moment I'm only going to concentrate on the left side. So all I've done in this one is replaced the source and the index for your benefit so you can see what is happening. This doesn't sort of happen in code. You wouldn't write this in code at all. You'd use the variables, but this is so you can see what is happening with these variables in the program. So we're working on the left part. So I need a function called left. Okay, and I've repeated the previous slide code up here where I've got the actual hard-coded values rather than the variables. So I need the left part, and that is going to be source, fiver, and index 2. The index 2 is going to tell me how many characters I need from the start of the string. So let's think about this. So I want, there's my index 2. The left side of the string is going to be 1, 2 characters. If my index was 4, the left side is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So the index is telling me how many characters to the left I need. And so if I have a function left part of fiver for 2, it's telling me 2 characters from the start of the string, the F and I. So I'm going to return F and I as my left part. So my new string would be Fi plus the right part of fiver. Difficult? Let's move on. So the index tells me how many characters I need from the start of the string. So I start at 0 and I count 2 characters. Start at the character 0 and count 2 characters. Sorry, 1, 2. This is kind of confusing, but you'll get used to it in the end. These are one-off errors that I've spoken many times about, so you need to be careful. There is a method in Python called slicing. I've just mentioned it. And it works on both a string and it works on an array. And in fact, if we take a look here, I've got string functions in Visual Basic and I've got array functions, and those two things appear in sort of all languages. So left and right you'll find in all languages, and mostly when we talk about string manipulation, pretty much can be the same as array manipulation in Python. And this slicing, this method, works for both a string or an array. Today I'm just going to focus on a string. So for example, this is the way it's written. Let me just sort of start up Python for you, give you an example. Let's get the shell. Okay, so we need a string. So here I've got source 02. So let's say I had my source string equals fiver. The way to do a slice is to start off with the variable source, and then we need a pair of square brackets. And in that square brackets we have a colon, which separates the left hand side, which is the start, and the right hand side, which is end, and it operates on this source. So if I put in here start at 0 and count for 2 characters, so starting at 0, count 1, 2, this should give me fi as a result. And there we go. And I think we can actually just do this. Fiver. So there's my source, and then 0 and 2, and it should give me the same result. So the string that I'm working on goes before the square brackets. The square brackets is separated by a colon into the start and how many characters. And I'll explain that in a second. So there you go, exactly the same result. I didn't need to start at 0. I could have started at the V here, 0, 1, 2. So let's see that one. Let's get our fiver again. And this time if I go start at 2 and give me 2 characters, oh, an empty string. It didn't like that one at all. Let's hope I'm getting this right. Yeah, okay. It's not giving me the length, it's giving me the end position. That is different to Visual Basic, that we will come to, because in Visual Basic, when we have a left side, it says it returns the specified number of characters from the left hand side of the string. So it needs to know how many. It's just accidental that this 2 returns 2 characters. And I can show you that again, because it's working from the start. If I typed fiver and I wanted 3 characters, start at 0, say for 3 characters, I would now expect FIV. There we go. So slicing is very, very difficult to get your head around, as you can probably see. And we will not be using it at all in the exam. It will not be present in the exam. You won't be asked any questions on it whatsoever. Okay, you will only be asked on what is left and what is right. How it's done is not necessary. But if you are programming this, then I want you to give it a go and try to understand what's going on. Now, we can shorten that. Because we're starting at 0, we can leave the 0 out. So if I go back to my code, and if I did it again with fiver, and I left the value out, it will assume 0. So nothing, colon, 3 will return FIV exactly the same. So I'm going to use the shorthand method in my program. So we're going to replace the hard-coded values that we used with variables. So we get source and index rather than 0 and 2. So my function for the left part of source and index is going to return the string, that's replacing the hard-coded values of fiver with the variable source, and the hard-coded value of 0 with nothing, and the hard-coded value of 2 with index. And that will return or give back fi. So let's just check that out in Python itself. So we had here source 0 to 2. Let's just do this one with hard-coded. So this is hard-coded where I'm using the actual string. So I'm saying hard-coded fiver, hard-coded 0, hard-coded 2, and return it. It gives me fi. Now I'm going to replace that hard code with variables, and I set the variable source to be fiver up here, so I can write source. There's my variable. Actually, let me just set a variable for index first, because I haven't got one. Index equals 2. Now I can try it. Source. Remember, that's 0. I just leave it blank, and then I can write index there. That is 2, and it will give me the same result as writing that out. But this time I'm using variables, which is really what we want. We don't want to hard code things at all. So that's the left part. The right part is going to be next, and this is our code so far. So I've got my function remove character. Now I've got a function left part. I'm going to write a function right part, and that's going to do the same kind of thing. It's going to take the index and it's going to return whatever is after the index, and we're going to use slicing to do it. But it is a little bit trickier. And again, that's something I will try to explain when we deal with left and right. Remember, this is right part and left part, something just a little bit different. So what we need to do is start with the character or the index after the one we've chosen. So if I'm on 2, I need to start at 3 and run for the rest of the length of the string. Okay, now a slice means if I give it a start value and an end value, it will return a part of the string. Like when we left out the start value, it started at 0. If we leave out the end value, it will always go to the end of the string, no matter how many characters there are. And that's what we're going to try to use. So to get these values E and R, I would really need to use the source string, start at 3 and run to the end of the string. Let me go back to Python and let's do that. So I've got my source string. I'm going to start at 3, and I'm not going to put a value in there. I'm not going to work out the length of the string. I'm just going to say run to the end of the string by putting no value in, and that should give me ER. Quite difficult to get your head round, I know. The right hand part is harder than the left hand part. And really we need what we were thinking of in the previous lesson when we used the word sequence. If we call this value n, or index, this value is index plus 1, or n plus 1. So if I'm going to not hard code, use variables, I need the slice to be source, the string we're looking at, starting at index plus 1. Every time when I split a string, index plus 1 is the one after the index, which is 3, and not giving a value there means just give me the rest of the string. Now that, briefly mentioned, that's not how write works. We will come back to that later on when I look at left and right and mid for Visual Basic and the exam. But that's what we're doing. So I've got, again, a little bit of code which returns whatever's to the right and whatever's to the left. And I can have that function. So if we used it with hard-coded values, we've got a 5 there and the index is 2, but I need to get the right part by using 3 and run to the end of the string. Now 3 is the value after 2, sorry. So if I put variables in instead of hard coding, source is 5, index is 2, source is the string I want to return the value from, index is 2 plus 1, which gives me my 3 running to the end of the string. And that is my function for the right part. So now my pseudocode reads like this. I've got 3 functions. I've got remove character, I've got the left part, I've got the right part, and I've got my main program. This is almost ready to be coded into Python. We've seen some of it working already with these lines of code. That was difficult. As I've said, if you are level 1 to 3, you can almost just think of the words left part, right part, end of story. If you're levels 4 to 6, then some appreciation of the fact that we have functions to get the left part and the right part from a string. And if you are level 7 to 9, then maybe have a go at writing it, make the mistakes, make errors, fix them, really get into coding. So that's our pseudocode so far. What we can do now, I think we have enough to sort of move from pseudocode into actual Python and make this work. So my next video will be on creating this code in Python.